Chris and Chris Talk Movies.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Chris Ferry, and this, of course, is my co-host.
My name is Chris Huddleston.
And today, of course, you may have noticed, if you have eyes in your head, that we are experimenting with video, and I don't know. We'll see. Maybe it's great. Maybe we don't do it again. But anyway, today we are going to talk about the Michael Crichton adaptation film. Do you have a synopsis for us, Mr.
Yes.
Holmes?
So, as you said, it's a 1995 film adapted from the Michael Crichton novel, directed by Frank Marshall, and it stars Laura Linney, Tim Curry, Ernie Hudson, Dylan Walsh. And the synopsis that I have is an expedition goes to the African Congo to return a gorilla to her homeland and to find a source of diamonds for laser guns.
Diamonds for lasers.
For lasers. On their journey, they discover the lost city of Zinj and a new species of killer gorillas, which they must overcome to survive.
Okay. I mean, yep, that's what happens in the movie. Now, had you ever seen this before? You had.
I had. So you want me to go first?
Well, sure. I mean,
Okay.
I didn't see it in the theater, but I probably saw it when it came out. But go ahead, shoot for it.
So I saw this in the theater. I have almost no recollection. I had not seen it since because for whatever reason, I was very hyped for this movie when it came out. I don't know if I haven't watched the trailer. So I don't know if it was a great trailer or what, but so Frank Marshall, the director, is kind of an interesting character, I guess you could say. He didn't direct a lot of movies. Other than this, he did Arachnophobia, Alive. Did you ever see that one about the guys, the plane that crashed and they eat each other?
I didn't actually see it.
Okay. Anyway, so just a handful of movies, but he's produced a ton of films. All the Indiana Jones movies, all the Jurassic whatever, all the Back to the Future movies. So tons of things he produced. And Michael Crichton, for people who don't know, a bunch of his books have been adapted, probably most notably Jurassic Park. He also wrote Westworld as well. So I don't know if it was coming off of Jurassic Park that made me excited about this. I don't know. The only thing that I remembered is there is a talking gorilla. That was literally my only recollection of this film. But seeing it in the theater, I was super hyped, and then I hated it. I remember I hated this movie, and I had no desire to ever watch it again. It popped up on Netflix, and I was like, maybe let's revisit that, see if, my views have changed. It's a tremendous cast.
Let's pause there for a minute because
Sure.
it's a crazy cast,
Yeah.
right? Laura Linney is a stone cold pro. I can't think of a movie. I certainly haven't seen all the movies that Laura Linney has done, but
she's always good.
I can't think of a movie that I thought, not Laura Linney's best. I mean, she delivers. And we'll get into how this film is challenging as we go, but Delroy Lindo is in this. Joey Pantaleone is in this.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about him. Yeah.
Right? I mean, as I was watching, Tim Curry is in this. Evil Dead.
Bruce Campbell. Yeah.
Bruce Campbell's in this. This cast is crazy. So one of the things I actually enjoyed about watching this movie is scene by scene being like, Joey Pants, what are you doing?
Just spotting all the. It's like
he's great in all the ways. Great.
It's like the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood meme with Leonardo DiCaprio, pointing at the screen. It's like, oh, look at, that guy's in it. This guy's in it, Yeah. So it does have, it's a really great cast. There are some weird accent choices. Tim Curry is Romanian. I don't know if in the book the character was Romanian. And Tim Curry, another great actor. I don't know why they couldn't have had him just be English.
Well, let's pause there again, too. When you say weird accent choices, I mean, it's a deliberate choice, probably at the director's level, because you've got him doing a Romanian accent you would need a steak knife to cut through, right? Laura Linney's the only one playing it straight, really, in that regard. You've got, what's the guy's name?
Ernie Hudson.
Ghostbuster. Ernie Hudson is doing it's sort of British, right? I mean, didn't you get that was supposed to be a British accent?
It's almost like a 1940s, that accent, what's
But
that
it's
accent called,
like,
It's not
like a North Atlantic Standard or
North
something
Atlantic,
like that, yeah. I don't know that that's what it's called, but I know what you mean. It's like, say, fancy meeting you here.
Yeah.
Like Americans talk like that. But everybody seems to be putting some kind of spin on the accent thing, and it's all over the board. And Ernie Hudson is delightful. Like,
I really like him in the movie.
he's just wonderful to watch on screen. I'm not going to say he's Laurence Olivier, but the camera loves him, and we love watching him on camera. So you go with it, and then you have people like Delroy Lindo, and I'm forgetting the actor's name. He was in Oz. That's how I know him. Another great African-American actor, and he is native. I don't remember what country they assigned him to, but he does a lot of speaking in whatever native language they've assigned him to, and then English with a heavily accented, version of English. And I think that the people playing quote unquote natives, it's more convincing. It doesn't feel quite so overwrought, like Delroy Lindo being, a captain in one of these African countries, sort of extorting them for money and kind of almost coyly messing with them until they pay him money. That sort of works because I guess what I want to get into is that whether this is a comedy or an action movie or a drama or what exactly this is, because so much of it is played as a comedy that sometimes the accent work it's fine if you're watching this as a comedy. And there's so many bits and scenes in this that are like, is this vaudeville? What are we what are we doing? I thought this was a movie about, like, an adventure movie about, whether it's not haunted. It turns out that it's ape. I mean, they're real monsters, but they're not supernatural out in the deep jungle. And you think, it's okay. So it's a thriller set in the jungle, and there's a monster in the dark that gets you. In this case, it comes leaping through the leaves and it grabs you. But there are scenes of this that are really played like it's a slapstick Jack Black or Will Ferrell comedy flick, don't you think?
Yeah, there's a scene where they're first on an airplane flying, and they give the gorilla a martini, so she'll calm down.
The gorilla,
she drinks the martini and then belches.
So there's an actor in a gorilla suit that has a kind of an animatronic supplement to the face. It's better than Planet of the Apes. And some of the stuff, when you see the gorilla at a little bit more of a distance and it's an actor kind of moving around in the gorilla suit, is, I think, fairly convincing.
Yeah.
But when you see close-up stuff, like the gorilla is sitting in the airplane seat, and they give the gorilla martini, and she's drinking the martini and then goes, bah. It's very clearly a rubber face that's got like some servos that are kind of making it smile and look contented, like, oh, martini,
Yeah.
And it's incredibly distracting. And I know this was the time period, but her Berkeley scientist guy, who's a sort of patsy / love interest. I mean, there's some weird,
which never really goes anywhere.
No. I mean, there's no chemistry on screen between him and Laura Linney, but they try and sort of shoehorn that in.
And she is actually going to try to find Bruce Campbell, who was her one-time
who she cares about.
Yeah.
And spoiler alert, he gets killed right at the beginning.
He's only in the first 5 minutes of the movie.
I say Bruce Campbell's in it, but I'm like, why would you cast Bruce Campbell in this and then not use
Why not
Bruce
have
Campbell?
Why not have and so I was thinking about this going into this movie, and maybe other.
Have him be the scientist. Have
Yeah,
him
that's
be
what I was
the
gonna say.
guy, the love
Have him be
interest.
the scientist. But going into this movie, like now, Bruce Campbell would be a draw. But I was
Yeah.
thinking, watching this movie, probably prior to this,
Yeah.
I had only seen Army of Darkness. I had not. I didn't see, somehow, even though I'm a big horror fan and I watched tons of '80s horror growing up. I didn't see the Evil Dead. Somehow I missed the Evil Dead movies. I don't know. I remember seeing the box with the girl coming up out of the grave. And I think I was just like, oh, that looks too intense. I don't know if I can watch that or not. And so I saw some friends took me to see Army of Darkness, which I didn't even know it was connected to those other movies then.
Right.
So I didn't actually see the first two Evil Dead movies until sometime in the 2000s. So like way after this. So I probably barely knew who Bruce Campbell was. I was probably like, oh, that's the guy from Army of Darkness. But yeah, why have him in it for just 5 minutes? Early on, it's like, oh, this is pretty great. Bruce Campbell, and I didn't remember his role. Like I say, I remembered almost nothing. But yeah, make him be the scientist, and then he can be jokey.
Yeah. When you watch the other guy on screen, and I don't mean to be cruel or just disparaging for the sake of being disparaging, but the other guy's handsome enough and he's professional enough. He hits his marks and he delivers his lines and he's acting and it's not wooden. But he's not throwing sparks. You know what I mean? Like there's no electricity when you're watching this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is when you're watching Bruce Campbell. I mean, you don't have to like Bruce Campbell, but he's throwing sparks. There's something like well, that's interesting and engaging in a way that this other guy is. They were clearly looking for somebody who was sort of a pretty boy, but also read as a bookish professor type, and they bring along another professor guy who just gets to be like, oh dear, I'm scared
Yeah.
character, which is another stock comedy thing. I'm like, why is this guy here? Like, what? This movie is just trying to have it all. It's trying to be sweet and savory.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, that being said, let's say Bruce Campbell had been the scientist role. How do you think he would have done with what they were trying to go for, the attachment between the scientist and Amy, the gorilla? That's supposed to be touching. Would Bruce Campbell, I mean, knowing what we
But
know of
was
Bruce
it?
Campbell
What
now, yeah,
was it touching? I
I
didn't think it
mean,
was touching, so I don't know.
it was intended to be.
I
But
don't
knowing
know. I
Bruce,
think he could, he can muster. He can muster. Even in Bubba Hotep, you saw moments where he got like dropped into himself. Like, oh, I
true,
didn't
yeah.
want to, never expected it to be this way. Or whatever. And it's like,
Mhm.
are you going to run at him with an Oscar? Maybe not, but you still feel it. And that's all you need to do. And I didn't
Yeah.
feel it in this movie. I didn't feel, they told the story. I saw what they were doing. I'm like, okay, but I didn't feel anything.
Mhm.
So it could have
I
been.
wonder how much of that comes down to just the fact that the gorilla is not all that convincing as being real.
I guess they hadn't discovered Andy Serkis yet.
Yeah, yeah. In all honesty, so Amy, it's kind of strange because Amy doesn't look great, although it became less distract. I just kind of went with it as the movie went
Sure,
along. I
sure,
accepted that this is,
sure. It
it's
could have
not
been a kid actor.
horrible.
It
Yeah.
could have been a kid actor. Like we need to get her back to her family. It could have been a kid, but
Hmm.
it was So there's this. That's a kind of a Goonies element to it. And then there's this kind of broad strokes, like broad accent, like a diamond mine of incredible bounty.
Hmm.
What are you? What are you doing? Uh, there's this crazy broad comedy element to it. There's like And this doesn't happen in the movie, but it wouldn't have surprised me if somebody had like, whoa, fallen down a slippery slope in the slippery rainforest and like fallen face first into a big pile of elephant dung, right? That would have fit somewhere in this movie. And they'd have been like, oh, and then everybody would have been like, ha, 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 laughing at this buffoon who fell in the poop. There's a 20% of this movie is that movie, right?
Yeah.
But then there's also like paddling across the uncharted Amazonian water in the misty night, and then something's coming up out of the water, and it turns out to be hippos, but it's as though we're not supposed to know what hippos are. There's some giant monsters, like they're hippos. I mean, it's still scary, but nobody goes hippo, or it's just like they're acting like it's some kind of a leviathan. But it's the kind of jump scare, you know, almost horror, you know, creature in the depths movie, and that's a solid 20%. Or the apes. There's no such thing as gray apes, and you're like, okay, whatever. I mean, is that crazy? Gray apes? Is that part of it? And there's a volcano that goes off, right?
Yeah.
And she has a laser that's some sort of a communication device that they're going to try and find these perfect diamonds that are the size of your fist. And she stuffs one in the laser and then is basically Star Wars. Like she's just cutting these attacking apes in half. Like,
yeah.
Laura Linney is doing this. And this movie is bonkers. But, you know, I will say when I first saw it, I hated it.
Yeah, that was my
and
same
I watched
reaction
it this
too.
time. I was like, you know, I don't know. This is more entertaining than I remember it being. I mean, if you don't expect anything of it, it's kind of like, this is crazy. And everybody's in it. I mean, I think at the time I didn't recognize these faces. But now I'm like, oh my God, it's him. You know, he's got like 3 lines. Or it's like, and that guy. It's like Joey Pantalone, Delroy Lindo.
And
it just was at one after another. You're like, this is great.
And it's not poorly made. It looks good.
No.
It's shot well.
It's not a cheap movie.
It cost $50 million.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's by today's standards, but at the time.
1995, dollars. But yeah. So, and, I was thinking, okay, the gorillas. So you have Amy, doesn't look great, but there are other adult, regular gorillas, and they look pretty real.
Yeah. The monster gorillas, they went a little overboard with. Yeah.
They don't look great.
It's people in suits. And then for the monster gorillas, for the actual gorillas, they give them realistic looking gorilla faces. And that's okay. That kind of flies. But the monster gorillas they've made look kind of like bad dental issues.
Yeah.
They're like, why are they so messed up looking? Like, why don't they just look like apes? Like the theory
ugly.
behind that is that the humans at the time of this lost city sort of trained apes to be their kind of watchdogs, right? And then at some point the apes sort of rose up and killed all the people, and now they're
bred the most violent, ones, which I guess were the ugliest ones too. They were violent and ugly.
They look like mutants.
Yeah.
And I thought that's not necessary. It's scary enough.
Yeah. So, but it's shot well. I mean, it looks professional, and the effects were probably on par with other science fiction of the 90s. I'd say my real problem with it is all of that jungle travel part is just boring. And, they're dealing with the military and all that kind of stuff. And it's not really good and entertaining until they find the lost city. Everything after that, if the whole movie were like that, it would be a pretty great, cheesy, B sci-fi movie.
What's actually, I differ in opinion a little bit. I think the trekking through the jungle stuff is boring. But I thought it was kind of interesting when they show up at the airport and Laura Linney just shows up with there's some indication that she used to work for the CIA, which you don't think of with Laura Linney, but there's all these sort of players, like independent contractors at play here, throwing money around. And then there's an explosion at the airport.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that there's been sort of a coup attempt on the local government. And Joe Pantoliano, in a role that he plays very well, is this sort of jaded, happy-go-lucky, jaded, insider,
Mm-hmm.
is sort of still bustling them around, loading stuff up. He's a company man that they've never met before, that's been hired to kind of get them all set up in country. And he's like, we've had 3 governments in 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
We do not want to be here right now, and they're all kind of ignoring it and don't look them in the eye kind of thing, like, oh, go this way. I thought that was kind of interesting how all of the pieces started flying left and right. And you're like, at any minute you could get stopped by a bunch of military guards that have their own agenda that have nothing to do with what you're trying to do, but get caught up in this power struggle. And I thought, and they're going from country to country, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're trying to get across the border to Tanzania, but now they're in, so they're in Africa, and it's a checkerboard. They don't know, but they're with people who do. And the idea of these people being caught up in a game they don't understand, with people they don't quite trust, but they do understand it better than they do. I thought that was kind of interesting, how the fortunes kept kind of flip-flopping and different folks kind of kept coming on and leaving. And the onion got peeled back a little bit. Who's this Romanian guy? Right. I mean, it's corny, but I actually thought that was kind of interesting, because that's the part of the movie where you introduce some bit parts that are juicy little 1 or 2 scene parts by name actors.
Yeah.
Doing interesting things, how they're trying to navigate this little bramble bush of getting deep enough into the country, to the unexplored part of the country, where they don't, like, they're flying in a plane and they're crossing a border, and I think it's Tanzania, I don't remember, but whatever military is it, the border is closed, so they try and shoot the plane down.
Yeah.
And it's not because they know who it is or anything personal, or they're opposed to the mission. It's just, our borders are closed. Here comes a plane, shoot it down. And they take out flare guns, and and I thought that was kind of interesting, because it was so fast. Like, they were just having to adjust to evolving scenarios so quickly. I was engaged in that part of the movie. And then they land, or I guess they jump out of the plane. And then they sort of start slogging through the jungle. And that's when I got
that was
tedious,
in particular, the
it's
part was,
jungle scene 1, jungle scene 2, jungle scene
there's
3,
a snake.
jungle scene 4. And it's the same, get there and find out what's going to happen. Why is this? This is not storytelling. Like, they're in the jungle, and now they're in the jungle longer, and now they're still in the jungle. It's like, just do a star wipe or something and get to where they're going.
Well, the stuff with dealing with the military, and it was okay. It was interesting, because as I was watching it, I was thinking, wow, this is a lot more adult than I remembered it being for this cheesy science fiction movie. And then later it gets to be this cheesy science fiction movie, and those parts feel like they're from another film.
Yeah, because it is a cheesy science fiction movie.
Yeah.
Right? It's a cheesy science fiction movie. Now, I mean, Jurassic Park is a science fiction premise that is leavened with comedy, right? I don't remember Michael Crichton's stuff being funny on the page. I don't think characters flirt with each other, and they have, they make wise ass comments to each other. But I don't remember reading it and being like, that's hilarious. I think that in the movies, you leaven the fright, scary stuff with comedy, but that's done well in the Spielberg properties. Like, he's sort of the master of that. And I feel like that whoever directed this was sort of going for that too, and not succeeding.
Yeah.
Because the comedy is like, now we're a crazy comedy movie. And you're like, are we? I thought we were sort of a, sci-fi thing that you're trying to leaven it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think they really, those two parts of the movie really fought each other. Because none of the comedy landed.
No.
And when I remember watching it, I thought, oh boy, this is too much from Tim Curry. But then I watched it this time and I was like, he's just in the movie he's in. I mean, he has decided what movie he's in, and he has made strong, big, bold choices, but clear choices. And he's playing that part, and he's consistent, He's the kind of craven. It's funny to me to see a character that is so greedy that even in the jaws of this is the volcano that you're in is erupting right now, and you are surrounded by 1,000 murderous
apes,
giant apes that you can't reason with them. They're animals that are just trying to kill you to protect the diamonds that you. And he's filling his pockets with diamonds, and you're like, I don't know. I mean, we've seen that character many, many times,
sure.
but it never feels true. I'm like, those guys are cowards. You stuff one in your underwear and run for your life. Not a few more. I must get a few more. And then guess what? They kill him,
And he never took the turn that I was expecting. He wasn't evil. He was just greedy.
He doesn't betray them.
Yeah,
right.
you're
There's
waiting
not a
for the
moment where
scene
he's like,
where
adios, Dr. Jones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's not that moment.
Yeah, I kept waiting for that, and it never comes. So I guess it was not too predictable in that regard.
Yeah, I didn't hate him as much. I think especially after watching Legend and just seeing some of his stuff again, he like a classical actor, he makes very specific, bold choices. And if the director is like, that looks great, moving on, then that's the performance you get. And, it's the director's job to stitch all that into a tapestry that makes a more comprehensive whole.
Yeah.
It's not the actor's job to be like, I think some of the other people are doing something slightly different, so I'm going to change, my performance. I'm like, was that good? And the director said, that was great. I'm like, okay, I'm doing my job.
And with this film, you would have to imagine, so Frank Marshall being this, he had produced a ton of movies before this, big movies. And so he was the producer and the director. So you would have to guess that he was, there wasn't a lot of interference or anything like that, that this was the movie that he wanted to make, I would think.
I feel like he would have benefited from some other, not, just some counsel. It seems like he was thinking like a producer more than a director. Like, oh, we got to have some of this in there. Yeah, we got to have some confetti, and then we got to have, because all of that's in there, but it's not, it doesn't come together. We've been watching baking shows, so I'm thinking about cooking. But, you cook, you make a chili or something, and sometimes it's better the second day because all the flavors have had a chance to kind of develop layers and meld together. And if you eat it right after it's made, you're kind of tasting all the different things, and you're not really. That's what this feels like to me. It feels like this kind of gumbo or chili of lots of different things that a producer would be like, oh, you got to have laughs. But, needs to be some scares. And don't forget romance.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was like they were kind of going, that this scene is the romance, all right? Really, stare into his eyes. Now, the monkeys are mating, and they're making funny sounds. Now, this is a funny moment. Now, you make a funny sound, and you make it again. And now, Laura Linney, you make it like you're kind of on board, and maybe something's happening here. It's just, it doesn't work.
Right.
But you see that he's like, oh, that's great. Moving on, and you're kind of like, no, you didn't get that. That doesn't work. It didn't accomplish what it needs to accomplish to be effective. You can't just say funny scene, scary scene, romantic scene, action scene, funny scene, romantic scene, action scene, curtain. That doesn't make a good movie. The care has to be taken to bring that Frankenstein of things together into a single living, What a metaphor. you know what I'm saying,
Yes,
right?
I got it.
It never came together.
No. Now a question, and I don't know if we've actually mentioned this or not. So Amy the gorilla signs, she's grown up in captivity, I guess, even though this is where she was originally from. But she signs, and they have this thing on her arm, and so it talks.
It's like when it detects the sign language.
Yeah, it's actually speaks the words.
Yeah, which I will actually finish your thought. I want to pick some nits.
So
that.
the two things my two things that with her that I was like, I don't know about this. So she comes to the rescue in the end. The scientist, her is basically kind of like her father, is surrounded by the evil apes, and she comes running in and growls at them, and they're scared, and so they back off. So that's one thing that happens, and then at the end, she stays with she's not going to return to captivity. She's going to stay with the wild apes. So, do you think that these gray apes would have been afraid of her? One, and do you think that this ape that grew up in captivity could now suddenly go, they pretty much animals that are raised in a zoo or something, they can't survive in the wild on their own because they don't, she wouldn't know how to find food. It'd be like, okay, can somebody give me a banana, or a martini?
I think you're right. And I think in the story / book, in the fictional world of this, she's supposed to be a remarkable ape.
Right.
Not just your typical apes are smarter than we think, but she's supposed to be really special. I think that's what is underlined here.
I think I would just say this real quick. This has popped into my head. I'd like to see a follow up to this, like a month later, and she's sitting around. I was like, so wait a minute, you guys don't have martinis? What? It's like she's signing to them, and they're just
reading
like,
the New Yorker, right?
Yeah, she's signing, and they're just like, what is wrong with this? I don't think she would go in and be like the king of the
all
the
monkeys. All the monkeys are sitting there with martinis and ties.
Yeah, she's domesticated them. Yeah.
It wouldn't fall that outside the realm of this movie, but
yeah.
But the bone I want to pick with that technology is, and I don't remember when they first set up Stephen Hawking's rig, right? That he triggers with, because all he can move is his eyes. So he triggers all that with like subtle eye movements, and he can type and make the machine talk for himself. In this movie, she's just wearing a glove, and they demo it by showing a guy who has been deaf since birth, a man who is signing, and he's wearing this glove. And it's supposed to be this crazy Oprah moment of him being like, this is the first time that I have heard my voice. And everybody's like, oh, and you're like, you're signing. You've been talking the whole time. It's just not audio talking. And you're not doing anything different, right? There's just a motion sensor glove or whatever. It's not really defined, but
no.
That is translating the sign language, the communication you've been doing your whole life, into a computer-generated voice. Like that, I guess in 2021, that doesn't seem that remarkable. Maybe in 95 or whenever this was made, that was like, oh, that's crazy. But it seems much more remarkable to me that whatever they do with Stephen Hawking, that seems crazy because he can't move. He can't sign, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is a way that he was able to communicate, and the audio trick is neat. So for the guy doing it, it's like, I am a computer. When they have the ape talking, it's a little girl's voice.
Yeah.
Right? So they add this kind of theatrical twist to it. So they make it they not only anthropomorphize her with a human voice, but they give her a little girl's human voice, which supposedly plucks at the heartstrings. But she's still just signing, right? It's not a chip in her brain that skips that step. It's just a computer that interprets her sign language. And we know that apes can sign. And that's crazy. That's awesome, right?
Coco.
But people are like seeing this ape sign and they're like, this is boring. And then it's like, I am Amy. And they're like, oh, an ape is talking.
Yeah.
Like, well, the computer is talking. The ape has been talking the whole time, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the ape didn't learn something new. She...
Right. And Laura Linney grills the guys like, why teach an ape to talk? And the conversation goes on. And you're like, is this supposed to be some core moral message of the movie? Like, why is this a 5-minute scene of him and her? Is this supposed to be them? Is this supposed to be a romance building scene? It doesn't feel like that. It feels like
it was.
She's like, but why? Why would you do something so meaningless? And he's like, because I'm a teacher and teaching is awesome. And she's like, yeah, but why?
They connect on his quote from Keats or whoever it is,
Right. Yates.
Or Yates, I mean. So you're like, oh, this is setting up the romance down the road that never happens,
Right. And Laura Linney is good enough that, she tells the story. She makes eyes at him and smiles at him when directed to do so. But there's no chemistry between those two on screen. Ever.
Yeah. And again, you feel like, I don't know if they were ever in a movie together, because they don't really appear together in this. But if it had been her and Bruce Campbell, would there have been that chemistry?
They would have made something happen. I feel like she just wasn't getting anything back from this guy. There was no back and forth. He was kind of doing his lines. That really landed on me early on with the guy at the studio, who is a great character actor. I don't say he's great. He's in a lot of stuff. Her boss that's like, we have to get that laser. We need a money machine. And in the early scenes where he's like yelling at her, you got to go to the jungle, I thought were just crazy. Like, you got to get more takes than that, because this is not a performance. He's just like, and then she's like, if you tell me I'm going for him, then I'll go. But the second I feel like it's about the diamond, like, it's 100% all about the diamond. And it has been so far. You know what I mean? Like, it's so crystal clear that this guy doesn't give a crap about, I guess it's his son, right? He's only interested in this mineral asset. And she is jumping through hoops to try and make this seem like a realistic scene. And he's just, I'm just sort of yelling my lines at you.
That's kind of how that guy always was, as I recall.
Yeah, I really thought it was terrible. But usually he's like the sheriff or something.
Yeah.
And all he's got to be is menacing. Like,
right.
We don't want to see you across these borders, in my jurisdiction.
Yeah, don't come in my town again.
I get it. You're threatening. You're white and you have a gun and authority, and I'll stay clear of you. And in this, there's actually supposed to be some subtlety to it, and there's none.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Back to Bruce Campbell just for a second. His career, Bruce Campbell has carved out a nice career for himself, and he's doing fine and everything, but he never quite broke through. He's a guy that could have been a real leading man, I think, and just think about, like, he's a guy that he would have been a pretty good Indiana Jones.
Could have been, for sure. It would have been. It had a different tone, but it would have been great.
A little more sarcastic than
Harrison and
Ford.
there's more of a craziness to his grin. Like, Harrison Ford has got that great grin he does that's mostly handsome and charming with just a hint of crazy to it. It's just like so dazzling that you think, I don't know, he might just do it. And with Bruce Campbell, it's mostly crazy.
Yeah.
You're like, I would not play chicken with this guy.
No.
Like he wants to crash the car. He's crazy and charming and handsome, but mostly crazy. And I think it's still great on screen.
Yeah.
But it would have been it would have been a little bit harder, I think, to square that Indiana Jones as professor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
True.
Tomb Raider, sure. Adventurer, sure. Even leading man, sure. But I think him as professor would have felt more strained. And somehow Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, manages to thread that needle pretty well.
Oh, yeah. Very well.
But I think Bruce Campbell would have done the comedy better.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's just interesting that he's always been kind of relegated to a genre guy, like I say, he's doing fine. I don't think you have to feel bad for Bruce Campbell, but
I think he likes that stuff too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think he's drawn to it also. He and Sam Raimi, it wasn't accidental. I mean, I think they were both really excited about that material.
Yeah.
And I think that does shape the rest of your career. But I think you're also drawn to do the work. You get offers and you're like, oh, I really want to do this one. Not so much about that one. And that's part of it too.
Well, and he did a lot of TV, like what he did. What was the one he had, like that USA show that was like on for years, and I forget what it was called, but it was something that I never saw. But one of those USA programs that somebody watches because it, was on for several seasons. But anyway, so what do you think? Is Congo a movie that how do you feel about it as far as a recommendation?
I would say it's on Netflix through the end of the month. Is that right? And if you got Netflix and you're bored and you feel like, you want to take a walk or you're curious or anything we've said makes you interested. I liked it a lot more this second time watching it in this context than I did in the first time. Do I think it's a great movie? No, I do not. Do I think it works? No, I do not. But there was a lot of entertaining stuff. Whether I was laughing with the movie or at it, I had fun watching this one. So I guess I would sort of say, if with that as a caveat, I'm like, I don't know, check it out. It's not great, but it is entertaining.
Yeah, I feel pretty much the same. I was prepared to come into this one and just be kind of like, I kind of liked it. And I thought you were going to be like, are you crazy? This movie's terrible. But no, I was entertained watching it. I don't know if it was just because I had such low expectations because I had hated it 25 years ago. So, I mean, this was, I'm not kidding. This was one of those. And I think, you mellow as you age. So I don't have I'm not going to go and see a movie now and it'd be like, oh, that movie sucked. And it back then it was like, this was one of these things where as I said, I was very hyped. And then it was a terrible movie going experience because it was just like, I hate this. And I remember the girl that I was dating at the time, I think like she kind of felt bad for me because it was like, oh, I'm sorry that movie sucked so bad that you wanted to see, And so that was just and I'd kind of blocked everything else about it from my memory because it was just like, oh, I hated that so much. And then I watched it and this is much better than some of the really bad movies that we've watched,
Well, you go into something wanting a particular thing and then not getting it. That's your experience, is this sort of bitter. I mean, I don't know that we want to discuss them, but I want to go back and watch the second and third Matrix films again because I wanted them to be as good as the Matrix in specific ways. I can even in my mind, I can concede that there were some spectacular visual sequences. But now coming up on this Matrix reboot or Matrix 4, I'm curious with no stakes, with being like, my verdict going into it is this is terrible. Maybe I'll give it another fair look and just see if it's quite. My hunch is that I'm like, that's not as bad. I was just disappointed more than anything else at the time because I wanted something that this isn't.
I think that definitely is. I think that's almost worse than a movie just being horrible is when you're hoping for it to be something and it turns. I think that's what happened with this is, I don't know if it was meant to be campy, but it's a campy movie. And
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be Jurassic Park. I thought it was going to be another like really great 90s science fiction kind of horror thing. So,
Yeah.
so
I
yeah.
agree.
Yeah,
So I
I
mean,
don't
I
think
guess
it's
I recommend it okay. Like if it's something that you think you'd want to check out, I'm not going to try and dissuade you. Don't waste your time. But I'm also, it doesn't work.
how do you think this would play for kids today? Like if your kids watched this?
My kids are kind of a special case, but I think that the reasons that it doesn't work are not about age. They're just basic, I harp on this, but like basic movie storytelling. Do you
Yeah.
care about the characters? Do you get invested in their plight? And the romantic interactions in between them, the fear to the stakes of one of them or more of them coming to harm, like how invested do you get? I didn't get invested in any of these characters, and so I don't think my kids would either. And I think their
Yeah.
patience with it would expire a lot sooner than mine would.
Oh yeah, definitely. I would say that would be my guess. So yeah.
But so there we are. Have you thought at all about what you'd like to do for next time?
I haven't really. I am actually tonight going to watch this new movie. I'm going to go to my sister's house and watch it. This new movie called Malignant,
Oh
which
yeah.
was released in theaters and is also on HBO Max. So that's one that it's horror, but my understanding is I don't think it takes place in the 80s, but I think it's kind of supposed to be like an 80s throwback. What I've kind of tried to stay away from spoilers because I know there's a big twist in it.
I unfortunately I read it all
Oh,
because
you know that. Okay, it's
I
supposed to
don't
be
have any
real.
interest in seeing it. We could do it if you want. The
Yeah.
cinematography looks really interesting, actually.
It's the guy who did. It's James Wan who directed, and I'm not a big fan. Like he directed Saw, which I hated Saw.
Obi James Wan Kenobi.
Yep, exactly. James Wan Kenobi. He directed, I don't know, one or some of the Fast whatever movies, and he directed Aquaman. But I was curious about I've heard some really good things about this one, so I don't know. But if another thing.
Why don't you watch it? Let's not plan to
Yeah.
do that for next week. Why don't you watch it and let me know broadly what you think?
Okay.
Because I'm not all that into it.
Yeah.
But if you watch it and you think it's really germane and like actually really worth discussing, then we could do it.
Yeah. The trailers made it look like just a very basic kind of modern horror film, but what little bit I've read about it and some things that some other people have said, makes it seems kind of interesting. Another thing, we could do sometime down the road. I don't know if we brought this up before or not, but Tim Curry got me to thinking. I have never seen in its entirety. I've seen bits and pieces. I've never seen the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which I don't know if you're a fan of that or that's something we could do sometime, unless you've seen it a bunch.
I haven't seen it a bunch. I have seen it multiple times. We could do that. That's certainly in the wheelhouse.
And that could
of
be
the
a
show.
Halloween, an October kind
Sure.
of thing.
I don't want to spoil anything for you right off the bat. Broadly speaking, it starts out real strong. And then I feel like it lags in Act 2 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
So the opening act of it and launching into Act 2 is just a roller coaster. It's just great. You're just like, this movie is insane. And I think that's where most of the fellowship comes from. And then as it plays itself out, I feel like it's like a wind-up toy that kind of winds down.
Okay.
But you should see it. I don't want to say don't waste your time. It's certainly a cult classic of our generation. That
I maybe have seen it, most of it, just in. I don't know if I've ever seen. I know I've never just sat down and watched it all the way through, but I've caught bits and pieces of it here and there, like on HBO or whatever. But I don't know it's ever been completely pieced together.
Susan Sarandon. It might be her first movie, actually. I'm not sure about that, but she is young. And Tim Curry is electric and steals it. And then the guy we just talked about in Dark City
Yeah.
is on fire. Like that guy just burns a hole in the screen. I got to look up and see what other movies he may have been in, because there's something about him that is just riveting on screen.
Mm-hmm.
But he directed it and wrote it. I think it's his movie, and cast himself as the sort of butler. So he's in it, but he's a very peripheral
Right.
character that kind of pops in. It's not a narrator, but he sort of pops in periodically. Tim Curry is the chief, antagonist. And he's just steals it.
Yeah.
But then as we get into Act 2, we follow him less, and we start following some of these other characters.
Yeah, Meatloaf in it, and
yeah, and they are less riveting, and their stories are less riveting.
Okay.
But you definitely should see it, and I think if you want to do it this Halloween, we should.
Yeah, that would be.
We should save it. We should save it for Rocktober.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, Malignant.
So
I'll let you. Yeah, sure. I'll tell you what I think about Malignant, and then we can decide if that's something that we want to cover.
And we can kind of let things marinate in terms of what we do next time. I know you're going to take a break with your family, so there won't be any break in posting these things. But we have a little time to sort of see what floats to the surface.
And I don't know if there is. I don't know when it comes out, and I don't know if it will be a theater only thing. And I know for you, going to the theater is I don't know if you want to go back to the theater, but have you seen anything about? I think it's called Last Night in Soho.
No,
it is the new film by. I can't think of what his name is. The guy who directed Shaun of the Dead and what is his name? Edgar Wright directed Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz and The World's End, or whatever it's called. So this is it has the girl from I can't think of anything right now. The chess show.
Sure. I don't remember her name either, but I know who you mean.
And it's like it has another actress in it, and one is from the modern.
It's that guy, the girl from the chess show, and another actress.
Normally, I'm better with the names,
and it is great.
It's fantastic. It's directed by somebody. No, but it's so Edgar Wright wrote and directed it, and this there's a woman who it's modern day from my understanding, but she somehow gets transported back to Soho in the 60s. Anna Taylor-Joy is the girl from the chess.
Thank you.
Whatever the chess thing is, and she's the character in the 60s who's a singer or something, and it's like a thriller or horror or something, but it's not comedic. It's pretty much all done straight, and it looks fantastic from the trailer. So that's coming up soon, maybe next month or November.
That could be cool.
Yeah, I really like Edgar Wright a lot. He's a really, really good director. Yeah. So anyway.
Well, that's for next month, but we'll have to think about what we feel like sinking our teeth into for next time. So bear with us, faithful listeners. Chris
and viewers now. Hopefully
viewers now, if you're watching it. Yeah, who knows? chrisandchristalkmovies@gmail.com. That's our handle, and we're on the socials. And
hopefully we matched our voice, because you always have that weird thing where, like a DJ or whatever, it's like,
right.
And then you see them and you're like, that wasn't what I expect that person to look like.
Well, I spent a lot of time getting ready for camera tonight, as you can.
I did. I stuck on a hat. So.
I slept about an hour and a half last night.
I didn't get much sleep either. I was tired today. So. Yeah.
And I'm half in the bag for Wednesday. I'm not doing my best. And I don't know, the video might not, maybe you're listening to this and hearing us talking about video and you're like, what? Maybe there isn't any video. I don't know. We've never done this before. So this is an an experiment for us. And if it all syncs up, then maybe you're watching it, maybe you're hearing it, and there's no way to see video because it looks terrible and I didn't include it. I don't know. We can't see the future.
We cannot. I wish we could.
Anyhow, yes, and so we can't tell you what we're going to do next time because we haven't decided that either. But
Exactly.
Shoot us an email, give us suggestions, give us your feedback, like, subscribe, etc.
Etc. Etc.
And anything else?
No, I think that's it.
All right, so we'll talk to you next week.